In some cases, cheating on your partner can cost you more than just losing them. This story has 4 updates, and it's about what I recently discovered. I found out that my wife of 17 years was cheating with 2 men and had been hiding it for 3 years. Yesterday, everything changed. I was driving into the high school parking lot for my daughter's volleyball game when I saw my wife's silver Mercedes SUV. This didn't make sense because she was supposed to be at her spin class across town. Next to her car, I saw a black Range Rover I recognized from her country club. I parked a few rows back, trying to understand what I was seeing. In 3 years, she never came to a single game. She always sent texts saying she was busy with client meetings or property showings. The game started at 6:30 p.m., and her spin class was from 6 to 7 p.m. She had made such a big deal about her fitness routine that we stopped asking her to come to the games. To give you some background, we've been married for 17 years and have 2 kids. Our daughter is 15 and a volleyball star, and our son is 12. I build circuit boards for big companies, overseeing important projects. The hours are long, but the pay is good, and I always make time for my kids' activities. My wife runs her own real estate business, which became very successful 3 years ago when she joined an exclusive country club to meet rich clients. That's when things started to change. I didn't notice it at first, but then her new friends started replacing the old ones. Family dinners became less common, and Sunday brunches turned into client meetings. Even our annual family beach trip was canceled last year because of a luxury property showcase that couldn't wait. The changes happened slowly. Designer clothes replaced her usual business casual look, and spa days became a regular necessity. Her phone got a password for client privacy, and she didn't want anything to be seen. She started keeping strange hours, but I kept telling myself the luxury real estate market never sleeps. Looking back, I should have noticed how she would hide her phone when I entered the room or step outside to take calls, saying the reception was better in the driveway. I should have asked why her networking events always seemed to last late into the night. Instead of going to the gym, I sat in my truck and called the gym where she took her spin classes. A simple question about their Thursday night instructor confirmed my suspicions. They didn't even have a spin class on Thursday nights. The Range Rover that I'd seen at the country club belonged to one of her important clients, someone she'd mentioned before. I'd seen it when I dropped off forgotten documents or met her for lunch when I had time off from work. Suddenly, everything started making sense, like when you find the right key and the lock finally turns smoothly. I walked over to where my daughter was sitting on the bleachers, told her I had an emergency at work and wouldn't be able to stay at her game, but I would try to come back. Then I did something I'd never done before. I started driving around to different places. I had a feeling she might be at her office, the country club, or even the spin class, so I stopped by all of them, even though they told me they didn't have class on Thursdays. My wife wasn't there. I went back to my daughter's game, obviously distracted, and my daughter noticed something was wrong. She asked me what was going on, so I lied and told her it was just a small work issue. When we got home, I told my daughter to go to the neighbors and get her brother. He didn't want to go to the game because he was playing a video game with his friend. After I got the kids settled, I ordered pizza for them and started researching private investigators in the area. My wife had been acting strangely for about a year, but I had kept putting off hiring a private investigator, thinking maybe she was just stressed. But it got worse when she didn't come home, didn't call, or text. The next morning, I called my boss and told him I needed a half day for an emergency. He asked what was going on, but I told him it was nothing serious. 2 hours later, I hired a private investigator and gave him all the information I had about my wife, where she goes, where she works, everything. The investigator didn't waste any time. 6 days after we met, he gave me a folder with photos from his surveillance. My wife's Mercedes was spotted leaving the high school parking lot last Thursday, but not during a volleyball game. It was around 1 p.m. The Range Rover followed close behind, and both cars went to the Westin downtown. They came out 2 hours later, looking like people who shouldn't be together. But that wasn't even the worst part. The investigator dug deeper into my wife's Thursday routines. It turned out she had been lying about more than just a spin class. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she would go to the country club around 2:30 p.m. for what she called client meetings. But the investigator's photos showed her spending a lot of time with the club's head golf pro, a guy much younger than her. It looked like he was giving her private lessons, but not just for golf. 3 years of lies started unraveling quickly. The luxury property showcases she claimed to be attending were tracked by her credit card to high-end hotels. But the property listings she said she was showing didn't exist. Her so-called networking events were actually meetups with both men, the golf pro and the Range Rover guy, who turned out to be a big-time real estate broker. The investigator found burner phones and a private mailbox at a shipping store where she had been receiving mail. She had gotten sloppy, probably thinking I was too busy with work to notice. The overnight bags in her car trunk weren't packed with business suits. They held things a real estate agent doesn't need for showing houses. I spent a week watching the evidence pile up. Security footage from the Westin, timestamp photos from the country club, credit card statements showing dinner charges for 2 at restaurants where she said she was meeting female clients, even a secret credit card I didn't know about, used for hotel rooms and expensive gifts. The golf pro was married with a newborn, and the Range Rover guy had a wife and 3 kids in private school. My wife was playing with fire, and she had somehow managed to keep it all a secret for 3 years. The investigator confirmed she had been seeing the golf pro for about 2 years, but the Range Rover guy had been in the picture for all 3 years. Starting right around when she joined that country club, I scheduled a meeting with the divorce lawyer for Tuesday morning. After 17 years of marriage, it was about to end. But first, I needed to get everything in order. The private investigator was still gathering evidence, and I had some decisions to make about how to handle the kids. One thing was for sure. Thursday night volleyball games would never be the same again. After meeting with the lawyer, I waited until the kids left for school on Tuesday morning. My wife was getting ready for another one of her client meetings at the country club. I watched her pack the same overnight bag the private investigator had seen her bring into hotels over the past week. The lawyer had everything ready, and papers would be served to her office later that afternoon. But first, I needed answers. Not for reconciliation. That was over as soon as I saw those hotel photos. But I needed to hear her admit it and stop the lies, even if just for a moment. I laid out all the evidence on the kitchen counter. The photos from the Westin, the meetings with the Range Rover guy, the golf lessons with the pro, the hotel receipts, the burner phone records, and the secret credit card for 2 people. But I wasn't the second person. When she came downstairs, wearing a designer handbag, she froze when she saw the evidence spread across the counter. For once, her carefully maintained real estate agent smile cracked. She didn't try to deny anything. She didn't explain herself. She just stood there, nervously touching her neck, the same nervous habit I had mentioned before. "The divorce papers will be delivered to your office this afternoon," I said. "Don't bother coming back here. I've already moved half the money from our joint accounts. That's the legal limit. Your keys still work, but the security code's been changed." She opened her mouth, probably to start one of her practice client pitches about how things aren't what they seem. But I cut her off. The golf pro's wife got her own set of photos this morning. Same for the Range Rover guy's family. You might want to warn them. I started walking away, but then turned back. By the way, the country club board got an interesting email about their head golf pro's extracurricular activities. Might affect your Thursday afternoon schedule. That got a reaction. Her perfect mask cracked completely. "You had no right," she said. "Save it for your lawyer," I replied. "Oh, and I already told our daughter you won't be making any more volleyball games. Not that you ever did anyway." I left her standing in the kitchen, surrounded by proof of her double life. The private investigator had suggested she might have a backup plan, a secret apartment or arrangement with friends. Good. That would make the separation easier. The kids would stay with me in the house until the divorce was final. The lawyer assured me that with all this proof of cheating, custody wouldn't be an issue. Later that afternoon, my phone blew up with messages. It seems the golf pro's pregnant wife didn't take the news well. She showed up at the country club and caused a scene. The Range Rover guy's wife did one better. She went straight to a divorce lawyer and planned to take everything from him. By evening, my wife's carefully constructed double life was starting to fall apart fast. 3 years of lies unraveled in less than 8 hours. The kids were at their grandparents' house, already knowing something big was happening, but not yet understanding their mother had ruined our family for a golf pro and a real estate investor who couldn't even keep their own lives together. First update, 2 weeks later. These past 2 weeks have felt like months. The kids moved back from their grandparents 3 days after everything exploded. Keeping their routine normal seemed really important. School, activities, and friends. My daughter still plays volleyball, and my son still has his travel baseball. Life moves on, even when you don't want it to. The fallout at the country club was huge. The golf pro got fired. Turns out my wife wasn't his only private lesson. 3 other members' wives came forward after the scandal broke. He moved back in with his parents in Ohio. According to the club gossip, his pregnant wife filed for divorce and moved in with her father. Range Rover guy had even more to lose. His firm's board suspended him pending an investigation into his improper business relationships. It turns out he wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was also steering big real estate deals her way, which broke several company rules. His wife hired the best divorce lawyer in the city. The Range Rover was replaced by a Honda Civic. My wife tried damage control, but her real estate business was falling apart. It's hard to sell multi-million-dollar properties when your reputation is destroyed. She's been trying to fix things, calling different agents now. Her broker took away her listing privileges last week. She's been sending emails to explain her side, but I just forward them to my lawyer. The only communication we have now is through the lawyers, and it's all about dividing assets and custody. The kids don't want to see her right now, and I can't blame them. They found out everything through social media. Turns out, country club members love gossiping in Facebook groups. The divorce is moving quickly. My lawyer says, with clear evidence of her cheating and her business in shambles, she doesn't have much to bargain with. She's already agreed to my custody terms, and the house will be sold and the debt split. I moved the last 3 years of my income into a separate account, the money I earned while she was living her double life. My lawyer says that's fair under the circumstances. Yesterday, my daughter asked me why I still come to every volleyball game. I told her it's because that's what parents do, they show up. She hugged me for the first time since this all started. Sometimes the smallest moments hit the hardest. There's still a lot more to handle in the coming weeks, but for now, we're taking it day by day. The kids are in therapy, and I started going too. Turns out, watching your life fall apart takes professional help to understand. Who knew? I'll have more updates as things develop. The court date is set for next month. Until then, I'm focusing on what matters. My kids, my work, and figuring out what normal looks like after a storm like this. Second update, 1 month later. Things have moved faster than expected. Remember the investigation into the Range Rover guy's company? Well, it uncovered a big mess of financial problems. My lawyer told me to stay far away from anything to do with their business dealings. I don't need that stress while finalizing the divorce. His wife's divorce filing went public last week. The local business journal published a story about the fall of a prominent real estate executive. They didn't name my wife directly, but they mentioned a local realtor involved in both personal and professional misconduct. Her broker terminated her contract the next day, and now she's lost her real estate license pending investigation. The karma train wasn't done yet. Remember those other women the golf pro had private lessons with? Their husbands are all on the country club board. They voted to revoke my wife's membership. Sleeping with staff members and ruining multiple marriages goes against their moral code. Her high society friends abandon her quickly, like a bad stock. My daughter's volleyball team made it to the state finals. My wife showed up at a game last week for the first time in 3 years. She actually wanted to be there. My daughter played her best game of the season that night. The house is on the market. The realtor from a competing agency clearly thinks it will sell quickly in this neighborhood. The kids. I found a nice rental nearby, in the same school district, and it's just a short drive to my job sites. The divorce is moving quickly. Her lawyer keeps pushing for mediation, trying to get something out of this mess, but my lawyer just keeps sending them more evidence. With her business destroyed and possible legal problems from Range Rover Guy's scandal, she doesn't have much to ask for. The kids are doing better. Therapy helps. They still don't want to see their mother, and the therapist says not to force it, just let them process at their own pace. As for me, I'm focused on work and the kids. The next update will probably be after the final court date. Until then, we're just keeping our heads down and moving forward. Third update. The divorce was finalized yesterday, just 3 months after it all started. Probably a record. The judge looked at the evidence and fast-tracked everything. When your soon-to-be ex is potentially involved in a federal investigation, courts tend to move quickly. Speaking of that investigation, Range Rover Guy, now driving a Honda Civic, was indicted last week for securities fraud and wire fraud related to his real estate schemes. My lawyer says my wife might be called as a witness. Turns out those business trips they took weren't just for affairs. She was allegedly helping him scout properties for his investment scam. His wife's divorce is also settled. She got everything. My wife's real estate license was officially revoked, with the board citing moral issues and financial wrongdoing. The kids are settled into our new place. My daughter's team won the state championships, and my son's baseball team is going to the regionals. Their therapy sessions are now down to twice a month. They're making progress. I found out my wife is living in a studio apartment downtown. Her parents won't take her in. They're disappointed in her choices. Her brother told me she's now working as a virtual assistant for a computer company. Quite a fall from luxury real estate. She tried reaching out to the kids on their birthdays, but they're still not ready. Life's not perfect, but it's settling into a new normal. The kids are thriving. Work is good. The legal drama is mostly over, except for those upcoming SEC interviews. Final update, 7 months later. I thought I'd wrap this up since the last pieces finally fell into place. Range Rover Guy took a plea deal last week. 8 years in federal prison and forfeiting his assets. The SEC investigation revealed he'd been running real estate scams for nearly a decade. My wife wasn't his first business partner, but she might have been his last. She made a deal too. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. She had to testify about every shady deal, fake property listing, and cooked book. Her testimony helped bring down Range Rover Guy's entire operation. IT doesn't change anything between us, but at least she did one right thing in the end. My son's baseball team won regionals, and he was made team captain for next season. Both kids have stopped reacting when someone mentions their mother. Baby steps. Speaking of the kids, they finally agreed to see her. They had dinner together in a public place. It was awkward and there was a lot of silence, but it happened. Their therapist says they're processing things in a healthy way, setting boundaries on their own terms. They're not ready for regular visits, but they're not completely shutting her out either. The new place feels like home now. It's smaller than the old one, but it fits us better. My daughter painted her room, which is the first time she's shown interest in personalizing anything since all of this started. My son built a gaming setup in the basement with his friends. The place is loud, messy, and full of life. Last I heard, my ex-wife might be moving out of state for a fresh start. She says she will make arrangements to see the kids. The private investigator who helped uncover everything retired last month. He sent me a card saying our case was his last big one. He said he couldn't think of a better way to end his career than by exposing a golf pro, a serial cheater, and a real estate fraud scheme. Sometimes I think about those Thursday night volleyball games that started all this. My daughter has one last home game next week before graduation, and you better believe I'll be there. Same bleachers, same spot, but this time I'm just watching my kid play. Thanks to everyone for listening to my story, and thank you, Tony, for sharing. If anyone is going through this, don't waste any time finding out the truth. Life is too short to stay with someone who has betrayed you